Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Geek Corner. Today we're going to be talking about Blade, released in 1998 from New Line Cinema. My name is Matt.
And I'm Tessa.
All right, let's go ahead and get on into it. So, real quick, I do want to bring up that we did recently hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. I don't know if I mentioned that in the previous episode, but we did, and gotta tell you, it's a really awesome feeling. At the time of recording or when this does go live, we will have had a bunch of videos go live of playthroughs and everything. Indiana Jones 5 would have been out already by now. And just let's go ahead and get on into the meat of the episode, which is Blade. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the movie and everything that basically happened leading up to this, because a lot of people didn't know that this was a comic book movie when it released, and it's actually one of the only Marvel movies to be released by Warner Brothers, which is basically crazy in today's world because you've got Disney and Warner Brothers doing DC and Marvel. So it's crazy to see that a Marvel movie released from WB, Warner Brothers. And at the time, there was no MCU. Like, we did not have an MCU. Marvel was actually in trouble a lot. Do you want to go into detail on that? Because you probably know a little bit more about that than I do. I just know that they had to sell off a lot of their assets and everything to kind of keep from going bankrupt.
They did. I mean, right now we're so used to living in the golden age of comic book movies, Marvel, DC, all the superheroes. Like, we just live in that world now, and we're so used to that. But I don't think a whole lot of people realize that back in the day, being a comic book nerd was, that it was very derogatory. Like, it was not cool. You did not get all the movies. It was rare. If you did get a movie, it was terrible because they knew nobody was going to watch it, so they didn't pour a lot of money into it. So Marvel was just bleeding money, and they had to do something. So they had to sell off a lot of characters, the rights to characters, to other uh, cinema companies. So like Spider-Man technically doesn't belong to Marvel, even though he's a Marvel character.
Yeah.
He doesn't belong to Marvel.
He's actually the only one, I believe, that is still not fully under Marvel's roof. I think Incredible
Yep.
Hulk might be the other one. I've heard people say that Hulk is now he's part of Marvel or the MCU, but I think Spider-Man and Hulk are the only two that are not officially under their wing, because Hulk is still owned by Universal. Marvel Spider-Man is still owned by Sony. They're just, and this is kind of why we haven't gotten a Hulk movie in so long, because we'll talk about that in another episode, but the Hulk movies have not been the best.
And even the X-Men, I believe the X-Men still don't technically belong to Marvel. And
I
the big
think
thing,
they are, because they're trying to get at least
oh, did they?
Fantastic Four. They're trying to get a Fantastic Four movie made, and Kevin Feige or Feige, whatever however you say his name, he did talk about it at San Diego Comic Con 2019, I believe. He said something about, I don't have enough time to talk about the X-Men or Fantastic Four right now. He was basically saying, just letting you guys know, we are working on those. We are getting them into the MCU, getting a movie made. With Deadpool coming out soon. Deadpool 3 is coming out, I believe,
Uh,
next year, and you're getting pretty much all the X-Men back. But there's also a rumor that Ben Affleck's coming back as Matt Murdock. That could be
what?
cool too. Yeah, I saw that. I don't know how true it is. I just saw it online. I was like, okay, I don't know how that makes sense, but hey, whatever. You want to throw more of 2000s comic book heroes at me? Cool, go ahead. But yeah, like, you know, I forget when it was. It was sometime in the 90s when they had to, like, basically pawn off all their characters to other studios. And I didn't know this had happened because I was just a kid at the time. So the only Marvel stuff I saw growing up in the 90s was the cartoons. We did not have the movies. We had the 70s and 80s had the TV shows. They had some 80s cartoons for Spider-Man and X-Men. But as far as movies go in the 90s, it was Batman. Batman,
Yeah.
Batman, all Batman. It was nothing but Batman. And yeah, Superman was big in the 80s, and they were trying to get another Superman movie made, but unfortunately Christopher Reeve got paralyzed, so they couldn't do it, and they were going to bring in Nicolas Cage, which I'm not sure how good that would have been. I don't want to go into too many details about a certain movie that just came out, so I'm gonna keep quiet on that. Um, But yeah, like we didn't have a lot of Marvel stuff. We had the cartoons. We had X-Men. We had Spider-Man. There was even an Incredible Hulk cartoon, which was on UPN, and then moved to Fox. There was also the Iron Man cartoon and Fantastic Four cartoon, which I did not like that one. And I think that's the reason I didn't like Fantastic Four for the longest time, because I just didn't care for the cartoon. It was basically due to that really bad theme song. But the Iron Man show was pretty awesome. And it had a cheesy theme song at first too, but then it got that hard rock and roll introduction in like season 2. I'm like, yeah, this is Iron Man. But yeah, so leading into that, I remember my dad would always go to the comic book store and he'd read the magazines. Like there was a magazine called Wizard, which is where Wizard World comes from. I don't believe there any of that is in, like, I think that's all been defunct now or debunked or defunct. Sorry, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Um, but he would read it and he'd tell me, "Oh, there's a Spider-Man movie coming out. There's an X-Men movie coming out." And real quick, I want to go over the casting of the Spider-Man movie because I don't know who was going to be cast in X-Men. Um, but I always like talking about the Spider-Man cast because it is all James Cameron.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
let's see. So a lot of stuff, and what we can talk about that in the actual Spider-Man, because we are going to cover Spider-Man at some point. We'll talk about his stuff in there. But he was basically going to have um, Leonardo DiCaprio as Spider-Man, Kevin
Mhm.
Spacey as Norman Osborn, Nikki Cox as Mary Jane Watson, some other actor as Robbie Robertson. I don't know this guy's name. Bill Paxton would have been a burglar. Michael Douglas would have been J. Jonah Jameson. Cool. Katherine Hepburn would have been May Parker. Michael Bean would have been Sandman. Okay, Lance Henriksen, Electro. Makes sense. All of his guys. And then the biggest one of all would have been my favorite, Arnold Schwarzenegger as Dr. Octopus. I don't know how that would have worked, but I remember my dad telling me that one, and I said, yes, yes. When's the movie coming out? And he goes, I don't know. So
Interesting. Huh.
they have been trying to get movies made for a long time, and they felt that giving these rights to other studios would have helped get them out of basically the gutter that they were going into.
Yep.
So, long story short, a lot of Marvel movies were in development from the early 90s, and Blade happened to be the first one to basically come out of the floodgates. You know, he was the first one to come out and say, "Hey, I'm here," comic book movie. But back then, a lot of people didn't know this. They didn't know that Blade was a comic book character. I only knew because of the Spider-Man cartoon. He showed up in the Spider-Man cartoon, and they based his character in the movie off of that look from the Spider-Man cartoon. Because if you see Blade from the 70s, completely different. He's got like a green V-neck, brown pants, weird looking. He showed up in the Tomb of Dracula comics from the 70s. But Blade was the first one, and I remember I first saw the trailer for this, and I was like, "Oh, that's that vampire guy from the Spider-Man cartoon. That's awesome!" But because the movie was rated R, I couldn't go watch it. So it yeah,
I
it
think
was one of those
they
things. I saw a trailer, I'm like, "That looks cool," but I know I can't watch it. And little did we know that was the start of comic book movies
yeah.
slowly building up to become better than Batman and Robin.
So I think that they depended on the fact that nobody knew that this was a comic book character.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the posters now, there's Marvel and DC
Hmm.
logos posted all over the place, front and center. But if you look at the poster for Blade back in 1998,
Yeah.
there's no comic book thing anywhere on the poster. Nothing to tell you that this is a comic book character.
Right.
And I think they depended on that since it wasn't cool back in the time.
I
So,
think I think even in the trailers they didn't have, because you see a Marvel trailer now, it's a Marvel movie because it's like right there front and center. You know that you're getting into a Marvel or a DC movie. They didn't even have the Marvel logo because, like you said, they didn't want to basically say, "Oh, this is a comic book." If we say it's related to Marvel comics, people aren't gonna want to go watch it. But in the movie, it does say in association with Marvel comics in the opening credits, which I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, it's one of those movies where you know they weren't sure. They took a gamble with it. It did well enough to make two more sequels. We'll talk about those in separate episodes. But it did, if you ask me, it did help get X-Men off the ground, Spider-Man off the ground. because those two had been in just development hell for the longest time trying to get both of those movies made. And Blade is the one that really helped get those two movies pushed out the door, because 2 years later, you got X-Men 1 after Blade. And God, what a movie, man. What an experience that was, too. Oh, man, I can't wait to talk about that movie. Um, so, yeah, I guess if there's nothing else you want to add to the history of the Marvel comic movies, I guess we can go ahead and get on into the breakdown of the movie itself.
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. So, Blade is basically a story about a half human, half vampire. His mom was bitten by a vampire. Therefore, when he was born, while she was pregnant, bitten by a vampire while she was pregnant. Therefore, when he was born, he was a vampire himself. They call him the Daywalker because he can walk during the day and at night because he's obviously half human. So, the movie starts off in 1967, and it's basically a really, really short origin story. You see a woman in a hospital, and she's being basically rolled down a hallway prematurely in labor. You're not sure what's going on with her. The baby is coming, hey, because she just suffered a, traumatic experience being bitten by a vampire. So the wallet drops on the ground, and you see the name. I forget the name of Blade's mom, but you see her name, and you're like, okay, well, whatever. So that's it. It's a really quick, here's the opening of the movie. Here's what's going on. Here's what you're getting into. Here's what you need to know.
Vanessa
Actually,
Brooks.
sorry?
Vanessa Brooks.
Vanessa Brooks, yes.
Yeah.
So you didn't know exactly, they didn't know what was going on in the movie. They're like, well, what happened to her? Did she get, what's going on? And so it's real quick. I think you see the baby's been born and everything's kind of distorted. It's like blurry. You can't really see a whole lot of what's going on. And they did this real, the 90s and 2000s did this a lot, where there's a lot of flashes on the screen, of flashes, and the camera's like moving around like static flashes. It's just one of those 90s and 2000s things. And she's looking up, and then the camera, it fades to black, and then you have the opening credits. It says present day. You just see a lot of shots of what I'm assuming is New York City, where the movie takes place. A lot of shots of that, cars driving, and this other thing that they did in the 90s with the speed up of the time lapse and cars moving real quick and then slowing down and then moving real quick and slowing down. It's just something they did. So then you see this guy and this girl in a car, and they're going, I guess they're on a date, like a first date, and he's over here like, hey, where are we going? Yada yada. He doesn't know where she's taking him. She's just driving. He's having a good old time. He looks like the guy from Night at the Roxbury, who played the friend at the gym who ended up marrying Molly Shannon's character at the end of the movie. I forget the guy's name in real life, but he was also in Scary Movie. He played the guy that kept beating up Cindy in the movie for no reason. He's like, we can't talk about this, and he's like just punching her for no reason. I just don't know his name. I think it's Chris something. Anyways, that's not him. But they're going through this meat packing factory, and you're like, what the heck is okay? But you see, well, you don't see this until after they go through the door. They go through the door, and then you see like bodies in bags. And you're like, oh, okay, that's odd. What is this? This is strange. So, what did you think of that when you saw that?
I mean, it was immediately, that what the heck is happening?
Immediately
Like,
obvious, you knew what it was. You're like, okay, so this is something. I was like, is Rocky Balboa gonna come in here and start punching like
yeah,
slabs of meat or something? What's going on?
yeah,
Wouldn't have happened because
exactly.
he's in Philly. so, so they go into the rave, which played one of the most crazy techno sounding songs you could think of back then, and it's just over and over and over and over, just on loop, the same beat over and over and over. I got that on Apple Music, so I listened to a lot. I'm like, man, this song, 10 minutes, Jesus, God. So he's going
Yeah.
around, or immediately she ditches him, like whatever, and he's walking around just trying to dance with whatever girl he can. Um, and I believe he looks, or the camera pans over, shoots over, and you see Quinn, who is also played by Donald Lowe, also from Grounded for Life, and he played Harvey. No, who did he play on Gotham? It was Harvey, right?
Oh yeah, no, he was the not sidekick, but he was a detective.
Well, he was Bullock, right?
Bullock, yes, Detective
Yes,
Bullock. Yeah.
Detective Bullock. God, I need to finish that show.
It was so
Um,
good.
so I think I'd stopped on season 3 and or 4, and I didn't really quite finish it because I think we ended up losing cable at that point, so I couldn't watch anything. So I was like, I'm not gonna watch this stuff. It's I think it's on Netflix. I can just watch it there or Max, whatever they have it on. So you see him, and he's got some stuff going on with him. We're not gonna talk about it here because it's not appropriate for the channel. But he's got some stuff going on. You're like, oh, okay, do your thing. So the guy's still walking around. He gets shoulder bumped by somebody, and it's Steven Dorff, also known as Deacon Frost in the movie. This is your first glimpse at him. You're like, man, that guy looks just pissed. Like he just does not want him to be here. And I feel like they just know, but this dude doesn't quite know what is going on. Like what, you know, why is everybody just ignoring me? And it's like he's just getting shoved around, pushed around, or whatever. And I think he bumps into somebody or something because he feels something drip, and he's like, what is this? He's looking at his hand, he sees it's red, and he's just like, whatever he thought. I think he got punched like right before this or something, or like I said, shoved, and he thought maybe he was bleeding, and he's just looking, and he checks his teeth to make sure he wasn't like busted lip or anything like that. But then it starts dripping more, and he looks up and realizes it's coming from the sprinkler, and he's just like, whoa. And I'm thinking the same thing. What is this? Because the first time I ever saw this movie, I didn't see it from the beginning. I saw it from about the middle to the end. When they meet Biscuit Boy to the end is where I first saw this
Oh,
movie.
yeah.
So when I finally saw the opening, holy crap. Anyways, he's sitting there and you see the DJ, everybody like they start putting their hands up. You're like, what is going on here? And the DJ, I think the banner drops and says bloodbath. You're like, oh crap, I know exactly what that is. Sprinklers go on, blood just dripping from the ceiling, and you're like, whoa, okay. They got a blood rave going on, and I think that's what people called it, was the blood rave. And so he's like, oh crap, I gotta get out of here. He's running around and he's just getting pushed around, shoved around, and one dude just decks him right in the face. And the thing was, he's seeing all these vampires. This is when you realize they're all vampires. And he's
Yeah.
seeing all them. He's like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. And they're just like growling at him, but he gets punched in the face and they start kicking on him, punching on him, beating on him. And he's just trying to get away. He's just trying to get away. He's crawling away. And then he stops. All you see is a boot. You're like, oh shit, here he is. You
Mm-hmm.
just see a boot. And they all start backing up like, oh, hell no, we ain't. So this is when you see the vampires the camera's behind all of them, but they start scattering, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
just opening a sea of vampires, and then you see a bunch of them running from the back, getting away, and you just see Blade standing there. The coolest introduction to any comic book movie.
Yeah.
Almost as cool as the introduction of Arnold Schwarzenegger in Last Action Hero. That is still number one to me, but this is second best to that. And I'm just like, oh crap, he is about to mess some people up. And you
Yeah.
just see him decked out in his black trench coat, all black, his armor, and the camera kind of slows down a little bit, and you see them running away from the back. Hey, we got to get out of here because we're gonna get messed up. So, he opens up his side, and I think you see his gun there,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, "Come on, try me," right? And one guy said, one vampire jumps up, and all he says was, "Come on, Daywalker," and he just busts out the shotgun, shoots him. He disintegrates like a Buffy vampire, and that's it. Game on. He's
Yep.
just wrecking shop on everybody in this place. He's sticking them to the ceiling. He's cutting their heads off. He's cutting their arms off. He is shooting them with stakes, and I'm just sitting there going, "Oh my God, this is awesome! This is the greatest freaking thing I've ever seen." But yeah, they're all fighting him, and they are not winning at all. It's like one guy against like hundreds of vampires. And at one point, he throws his shotgun, and I think this dude tries to jump at it and misses completely. And then he comes back, or he because he ran out of ammo, I think, so he has to get his blade, his little boomerang blade that I call it, and he's just throwing it. And they show him standing against the wall, and he just and throws it. It spins around, cuts all their heads off, and then he catches it and smiles. I'm like, okay, Wesley, good one. So he's wrecking shop on them, and at some point they're all gone, and he's fighting like two or three inside um, this little room, and they're playing Junkie XL, which is one of my favorite groups. One of my favorite tracks is playing in this movie, and I forget that it was even playing because I hadn't seen the movie in so long. I'm like, And I'm sitting there listening, going, what song is this? I had to Google the Blade soundtrack because I knew it had it in Apple Music. I was like, what is it? And then it
Mhm.
said Junkie XL. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So they're all gone. He checks no, he doesn't check the guy yet, but Quinn comes out and he says, basically, we're going to mess you up. He's like, F him up, basically. And this is when he actually gets into the fight with I think four, I don't think they were vampires. I think they were their familiars that he was fighting because I don't remember any of them disintegrating. I could be wrong. I know that he gets rid of all four of those guys, and then Quinn is like, basically, I'm going to mess you up. And he shoots him with a stake right here. And then I think he stabs him with the other one, or shoots him again with the other one right here. So Quinn is stapled to the wall, basically.
Yeah.
And I think he has already cut his arm off, I believe, or he was getting ready to, or he did it.
Mhm.
He cut his arm off after that. But Quinn starts talking in, I want to say it was Latin, if I'm not mistaken, because he was speaking a different language altogether. It might have just been a bunch of gibberish. They might have just said speak, just mumble some stuff. So then he sets him on fire, and this is when the police come in, and he checks the other guy first, make sure he hasn't been bitten, and this was when police come in, and they're like, hey, we got to find out what's going on. Blade's gone by this point.
Mhm.
So, any thoughts on this opening sequence of events?
So the beginning scene was one of the more tough ones for me to watch, and it's kind of my love-hate relationship with Blade entirely, especially in movie form, because I love vampires, I love comic books, but the horror side is where I stop liking it. So like oh my god, I just went blank on the name. The Kate Beckinsale
Underworld.
Underworld, yeah. So like the Underworld vampires, like I love that stuff. But like Blade, the way they shot this movie was Underworld, but yet also adding in the gory side of it. So
Yeah,
like the whole gory side, I was just like, okay, oh, I don't like it. But from the comic book side of it, the way they changed it, because like you said, he looked so different from the comic books that we had seen him in. And it was kind of like a train wreck, but not a train wreck. It was just like a new shiny object that I couldn't look away from. I'm like, this is really cool, but oh, that's gross. Okay, this is really cool again. Oh,
yeah,
it was really funny.
yeah. There were some spots in this where I was kind of like, okay, that's like we'll talk about Biscuit Boy later, but that scene kind of grossed me out a little bit too. Um, then we after this happens, we basically go to, I think it transitions to a hospital, and I think this is when they bring in Quinn into the hospital. He's burnt to a crisp, like, but he's still alive. He's burnt
Mhm.
to hell, and this is when Karen, the sidekick of Blade. Well, sorry, spoiler, getting ahead of myself there. Her and her ex. I didn't realize they were exes at first when I first watched this, and then I started listening to the dialogue more when I watched it recently. I'm like, oh, they're former datees. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And the guy's just like, maybe give us another chance. And they're talking about or he says that there is a body in the morgue or that somewhere that he wants her to check out. And I think they're
Mhm.
trying to cut him open and they can't. And so they're just like, okay, well, the skin's too rough. We can't get through it. And they're just talking, chit chatting, yada, yada,
Mhm.
yada, yada, blah, 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 shooting the shit. Quinn pops up. He just pops up, bites the shit out of that guy. And she runs out. She's like, I'm out. Peace out. I'm done. I'm not going. I'm staying here. That guy's just like, he's dead. And
Mhm.
she's running out, but Quinn's chasing after her. He's much quicker, obviously, because he's a vampire. And he catches up to her and bites her. And this is when the camera slows down a bit and they're spinning around. And he looks up and you see, or she looks too. And you see this like shadowy figure walking towards the camera. And he looks up too, like, uh oh. And then the image kind of unblurs. You realize it's Blade. And he just punches him in the face. And no, this is when he cuts off his arm. This is when he
Oh,
cuts off
yeah,
his
yeah,
arm
yeah,
right
yeah.
here in the hospital. Yeah, because he punches him in the face and he tries to attack him, and then that's when he slices his arm off, and he basically says, "Get away from me, you freak!" And I'm like, "Well, you're the vampire, dude."
Yeah.
But I get it. I started thinking about it. I'm like, "Oh, to them it's normal, but he's a daywalker. He's half human, so he's the freak to them. Whereas if we're humans, you'd think the vampires are the crazy ones, you know? Or like in the X-Men movies, the mutants, they think they are the crazy ones because they're different from everybody.
Yep.
So he punches Quinn. Quinn runs off, and this is when the security comes out and starts shooting at Blade. They start firing. He turns around and they hit him. He goes, "Motherfucker, you out of your damn mind!" One of my favorite lines of the whole movie, because there's oxygen tanks in there, and it's like, I understand what he's talking about. You guys are stupid. Why are you shooting a gun in a hospital like that
Yeah.
with oxygen tanks around? You can blow the whole place up. So he chases after Quinn after that, and Quinn jumps out the window and flies across an alley to a skyscraper. I mean, I'm thinking Cobra Kai when, if you haven't watched it, when Johnny Lawrence has the kids jump across a roof. I'm like, that's a lot farther than, man. And so he obviously super strength. He jumps across, and they both end up. Blade and Karen both end up at the window. She's just bit to crap. Still alive, and he's trying to figure out how to get across. And he just throws her, just yeets her across about the alley, and she lands on just the softest of platforms, just this little like mattress looking thing, and then he jumps across. Well, she gets across and her shoulder's dislocated, and he's like, okay, I gotta pop this back into place. And his face, when he pops it, it just like, his eyes just go boop. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he pops it back into place, gets her around the door, because right on their tail is another security dude with the machine gun, and he's firing back down at them. And he's shooting at the door. And I'm sitting there going, well, guys, they're already gone and you're still shooting your gun. So it makes no sense. Why are you still shooting? They're not there anymore. So this is when the camera starts crossfading to basically Blade in the car. He's driving back to his hideout. He's got Karen in the car with her. She's not turned yet. She's in the process of turning into a vampire, and he's trying to get her there before this happens. This is when we meet Whistler. Well, real quick, do you have any thoughts on the hospital scene before we move on to the next scene?
Like the parts that you were talking about where they're jumping across the rooftops, it, of course, this came after Blade, but it was very reminiscent of Ben Affleck Daredevil movie, like at night, you know,
Yeah.
jumping across, doing all that, and then getting in the car, when Daredevil's beat to hell, blind, getting in the car, somebody's got to save him.
Yep.
But
Yep.
it had a very similar feel to that. But yeah, the panicking, just trigger happy security guards were comedic fodder.
Yeah, it was a very short scene. But yes, definitely one of the scenes where it's like, okay, this is kind of cool. It was a continuation of the previous scene. It was kind of like Halloween 2, when the whole movie was basically after the first movie in an entire hospital, but just pushed down to like 5, 10, 20 minutes, I think. So they're going back to the hideout. And this is when we meet Whistler, and he's telling her she's been bit. She's turning fast. We need to do something. And he puts the garlic injection into her. And Blade's like holding her down, because this is like the equivalent of, I guess, getting a shot or something that's gonna like send a burning sensation through your whole body. And that's what was happening. It's like basically getting it's like how an antibiotic does, where it's like gets all this whatever's in you out. And she's just like, clenching up and everything. He's just trying to hold her still, and I think he gave her like something to bite up. No, I'm thinking of Starship Troopers. Never mind. So he's holding her down, and basically Whistler says, hey, it might not help, but we're gonna try it anyways, and so let's go ahead and just do this anyways. And the scene's not real long. I think it's just that, and then it goes into a little bit of Whistler and Blade just talking about some stuff, saying, hey, we got to figure out our next move. I believe the next few shots are just Blade walking through the city and everything. Actually, no. This is yeah, that's right. She wakes up, and they're basically telling her, you need to get out of the city because you're marked. They're going to keep coming after you. You got to get out, get somewhere else, get somewhere safe, basically. She's like, I'll think about it, kind of thing. But then flashes to a meeting of the Vampire Council, or the Jedi Council, as I called it, because they're basically telling him, "You're never going to be part of us." It's Deacon Frost. I'm sorry. He comes in and they're like, "You're never going to be part of this group, this band of merry men. You are a disgrace," because he was not a pureblood. They were all born vampires. He was turned
Yeah.
into a vampire, so he is not pure blood, as they say.
Hmm.
So they want nothing to do with him, kind of thing. And he's looking for Lamagra, the blood god, and basically he's trying to get them to go on board with this. And they're like, "No, not happening."
Hmm.
So basically, they're just telling him, "Ain't gonna happen. You are not going to be part of this group at all. So just get out, go back home, do whatever you gotta do." Then it goes back to Karen, who's going back to her apartment. And I think this is around the time where Blaze kind of just walking around getting some stuff from his, friends and everything, or some supplies and everything. I don't actually remember when that scene happened. I just remember there was a few shots where it was just a lot of, filler for the movie. But Karen is walking around and she's looking around every corner, because, hey, I'm marked, so somebody's coming after me. I don't know who. I just got to look, over my shoulder and everything. So she ends up back in her apartment, and a cop shows up. And she's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "Well, you were reported missing, so we're trying to figure out, what was going on, where you've been."
Hmm.
And she says, "I'm fine." Yada 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 yada, blah blah blah. And she says something, and he's like, "No, you're dead," or whatever. And he starts trying to shoot her. Well, right when this happens, Blade just pops up out of nowhere and just slams the guy's head into a table or something. Just beats the crap out of him. He's just throwing him
Hmm.
around, and the whole time she's going, "Is this really necessary?" And he's
Yeah.
just breaking her whole apartment. And he says, she goes, "He's a police officer." And he's like, "No, he's a familiar." And she goes, "What?" And he pulls the collar down. You see the tattoo of the familiar. They had already told her about this too. They said familiars
Hmm.
because I think she saw the tattoo on, when she's in the elevator. She saw the tattoo on one of their necks or something. And she's like, "Okay, whatever."
Yeah.
And she thinks they're following her. But turns out they were just some people going to another room somewhere.
Hmm.
So he tells her he's a familiar, beating the crap out of this guy, and he says they end up downstairs, and this is funny because they're downstairs, and he's asking where Frost is, and he's basically saying, "F you, I'm not telling you anything." And he goes, "F
Hmm.
me, no, F you," and that's the part where he's gonna pull out the gun and shoot the guy in broad daylight, but
Yeah.
he's beating the crap out of this police officer down in broad daylight on the street, and I'm just like, it's New York, nobody bats an eye on that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I get, what some people might have been thinking, hey, he's assaulting a police officer, but really he wasn't a police officer. He was just posing as one, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, the guy takes off, he's gone, and they're saying, "Hey, we're gonna have to wait for him." So, do you have any thoughts on that scene when he attacks him in the apartment?
So
Or the scene before that with the council too, because I forgot to ask about that part.
yeah, no. So going back a little bit to the Whistler part, a fun little tidbit that I found out when I was, just going through some videos. I didn't know that apparently it's a really big Mandela effect. Like a lot of people think Whistler is Jeff Bridges. A lot.
I can
Uh,
see it.
uh,
Yeah,
yeah. So whenever they're like, no, that's not Jeff Bridges, a lot of people will swear up and down. Oh, that no, I remember it was Jeff Bridges. It was Jeff Bridges.
he
I
didn't even
didn't
look like
realize.
that back then, though. That's the
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. Yeah. But apparently they just remember seeing it back then, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, seeing this movie and then just remembering the vague look of Jeff Bridges and then connecting it to Jeff Bridges now. But yeah, apparently a lot of people think that Whistler was Jeff Bridges and they don't realize that it's not.
Probably due to Big Lebowski. I think that came out around the same time, so they're probably getting
Yeah.
confused with that. I can see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. But yeah, no, the scene with the familiars, when you finally figure out what they are. I had not
Hmm.
played Castlevania yet, so I didn't know what the heck a familiar was, and I really didn't watch Dracula or anything either, because I know they talk about it in there too. But one of the Castlevania games, you do have familiars that follow you around. I don't think it's the same thing, like it's a fairy, but they
Mhm.
follow you around and help you. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Um, but yeah, you get a whole like on basically a whole spew on familiars and everything, and he starts talking about who all is vampires, and um, this is when they're actually waiting for Officer Friendly is what he calls him to come back.
Mhm.
No, Officer Friendly is a different movie. Man, I think I'm thinking of Weeds. Um, which is funny because the guy that got bitten by the vampire in the hospital by Quinn, he was on a later season of Weeds. He played a doctor or IRS guy or something. I was like, wait, that guy's in Blade. That's cool. Um,
Uh,
so no, I think he did call him Officer Friendly. So they're driving around and does that little thing again where the camera speeds up, slows down, speeds up, slows down again. But Blade's explaining to Karen all the different people that are vampires, and he says the bouncer at the door, that person over there, and the lady on the corner. It's not what he called her, but that's what he was referring to. So,
that
cause
word.
yeah, so she's asking a bunch of questions and he's answering them and everything. And meanwhile, I think they're waiting for the cop to come back, and um, he finally makes it back to his car, and they tail him to this club. And so Blade walks up to the door, and they said, oh, "You got an invitation." And then the next scene, you see the guy flying through a window. Blade doesn't need an invitation; he just does what he does.
Here's my
So
invitation.
yes, so there, Officer Krieger was his name. So they're in the. Oh, I skipped over a part. I believe no. At one point, Krieger gets killed by Frost, and I think it's in between. I think Blade follows him into the club, and he takes off or whatever. Right. Ends up back at Frost's apartment, and he's telling Frost, hey, Blade's after us, this and that, yada yada yada. You see Quinn's slowly healing, getting his skin back from being crispy. He's getting back to normal, and Krieger's talking to Frost saying, we got to do something about Blade. He's onto us, this and that, blah blah blah. And Frost is just tired of hearing it. He just bites into him, throws him in the pool, and that's it. He's dead. And everybody starts woohooing and cheering. They're like, "Oh, he's such a badass!" Blah blah. He starts making out with his girlfriend, like the blood on his face. Still, I'm like, ugh, whatever,
Mm,
whatever. You guys, vampires,
okay.
I guess, whatever floats your boat. And then I think it's at this scene where we go back to the club, and they're going through trying to find, whatever was behind the door, because he tells him it's in the freezer, and Blade doesn't believe him because he's thinking he's just lying to him and telling him what he wants to hear. And he goes, "It's in the fridge. I'm not lying. I'm telling you it's in the fridge." And he opens up the door. You see a stairway down to a basement, and he lets Krieger go. And that's when he gets bit. I think I might have gotten ahead of myself on that one, but I didn't remember exactly when it happened. So he's
Mhm.
going around, and this is when they come across Pearl, Biscuit Boy. Big old zombie. I mean, not zombie, vampire. Big
Oh,
old vampire. Big one, like huge.
yeah.
And he's just sitting. I think he's talking to. Oh yeah, that's right. Because he's talking to Pearl at the same time. Pearl's talking to Frost at the apartment, and he's basically telling him, "Hey, Blade's here, blah blah blah, or he's coming or whatever." And he's telling
Mhm.
him, "Pearl, you're done. Bye." So then it shows Blade and Karen talking to him, and he's got a UV light, and you're just like, what's that supposed to do? But I think they explained it earlier. They said the UV light is supposed to burn them. It basically acts as the sun, and it burns them.
Mhm.
Um, and he's asking Pearl, "Hey, what's this right there?" And he's like, "Oh, it's a video game, but it's the thing that Deacon's been looking at for the La Magra, the blood god." And he's like, "I don't believe you. What is it?" And she says, or he's trying to get him to talk, and he starts, zapping him with the light and everything, and
Mhm.
burning him. And this scene's kind of disgusting and disturbing at the same time, because you hear him start squealing and like pussing and stuff, and you're just like, oh. Mm-mm. So he's trying to figure out what it is, and eventually I guess he just tells me, he starts speaking that other language, but the subtitles are saying La Magra is coming, you're all gonna die, kind of thing. So he stops, and he gives the thing to Karen, and he says if he moves, zap him. So Blade's looking at it, and he starts to scream again, and she zaps him, and he goes, looks at her like, "What was that for?" And she goes, "He moved." um. So, any thoughts on the Pearl scene? Because it's just like I said, kind of gross to me at the same time because of just
Uh,
how disgusting the character. I know it's makeup, I think,
it,
but the character just looks disgusting to me.
it does. It's gross. Like there's just no other way to say that. It's really nasty.
It is what he calls him, Biscuit Boy, obviously. So you get an idea of what he means by that. So this is when Blade finds out Frost needs 12 people to get La Magra to come back, and that's where the council comes into play, but not yet. So,
Mhm.
sorry. So, I believe this is when they start exploring a little bit more. They take the disc and everything, and they're exploring a little bit more, trying to see what's going on here, what this whole place is. Why is there a hideout in a karaoke bar? They find a whole slew of vampire stuff, like old
Mhm.
documents and old, I guess you could say
Ancient
biblical stuff,
artifacts and stuff.
artifacts,
Yeah.
this and that, and you're just like, man, this is crazy. But then you see this little girl running around. This girl was watching Mortal Kombat earlier in the movie, because I saw the glimpse of Reptile from the thing. I was like, that's Mortal Kombat. That's pretty awesome. New Line Cinema, go figure.
Mhm.
So she's running around, and Blade's like, what was that? And he's trying to find where she is, and then he finds her in a corner, and this girl busts out some damn karate. I'm like, holy crap. This girl's kicking Blade's ass. Just wailing on him, kicking his ass. And
Mhm.
basically, they somehow corner him and capture him and Karam. And he basically, Quinn shows up, and they're all saying, hey, we're here. Look at my new hand. And then he punches Blade in the face and then punches him again. And he goes, in fact, I owe you one. And he stabs him with the stake. And he goes, no, actually, I owe you two. And stabs him with the other one. So Blade's just sitting there. And one of the guys goes, I got his pig stick, right? He's got his sword. And earlier in the movie, I didn't mention it, but earlier in the movie, Karen's looking at this and she's touching it and it starts spinning. You're like, what the hell is this supposed to do? And that's when the mini blades come out of the sword handle because only Blade can hold it. If you're a
Mhm.
vampire, you can't hold it. It's like what's the word I'm thinking of? Like not a kill switch, but
Um, like biometric. Yeah, it's
yeah,
like
yeah, like
the only
only
way it'll work.
only you can use it. There was a movie or I think Judge Dredd did that where you could not use a gun that registered to wasn't connected to
Mhm.
you or keyed to you with your fingerprint or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, the guy's hand just flies off and he starts laughing like, oh, and Quinn's like, I got his pig stick is what he says because he thinks he's funny. So Blade starts laughing. He goes, what are you laughing at? And he turns his head and you see the earpiece. So Whistler's been listening in the whole time and he just plows through the wall and he goes, I catch you effers at a bad time. Just shoots all of them. And this is when they kind of hightail it through that hole in the wall trying to get out of there. It's basically, I think, a hole to the subway system. And they're running around down the subway system and Whistler's with them. And so Quinn and um, shoot, Frost's girlfriend, I forget her name. I don't even think I tried to look up what her name was. They're chasing them with a bunch of other, what I'm assuming is familiars. The guys in the sunglasses
Yeah.
and the black and everything. They look like Joker's guys from Batman '89.
Yeah.
So they're running down the hallway to the train tracks. And I think one of them falls on and gets just electrocuted and basically disintegrates there because it basically burns him in a way. And so they get further down the meanwhile, they're like right against the train tracks. So they're getting further down where the trains are, and the Quinn and crew are chasing him. And at one point, they get away from them, but Quinn is still there somehow. He's still with them, and Blade jumps across, Quinn jumps across, and they're fighting. And I know Spider-Man 3 stole this idea too. He takes Quinn and shoves his face into the side of the train, and his face is just wearing down, getting chopped up and everything. Mortal Kombat 9 did this as a fatality too, which is pretty cool. But if you watch Spider-Man 3, he does the same thing to Sandman.
Yeah.
Puts his face against the train, except it's less graphic. He does that, and then I forget what happens to Quinn after that. He knocks him down or something, but he doesn't die, and Karen's trying to figure out where Whistler is, and he crawls through a little sewer grate underneath to get away. So
Hmm.
she sees, okay, he's actually alive, so he's good. So her and Blade get away, but Blade's injured, and they get back to. I don't think this is when they capture her, right?
I don't think so. Not yet.
Okay. Uh, wait, no, it is. Isn't it when? Because I think next is when they show Frost has the head vampire of the group. And I'm trying to remember off of what I watched weeks ago with this, but
Hmm.
he has the this guy was in Ace Ventura. He's been in a bunch of movies. He was in I don't think he was in Demolition Man, but he's been in a bunch of movies, and he's just one of those guys. You're like, okay, it's that guy, but I don't know your name. So he's got him, and they're all on a beach waiting for the sun to rise, and
Hmm.
he takes the hood off, and they're all putting on like lotion or something to keep them from burning because they're all vampires. They can't be in the sunlight, so they've got their biker gear
Hmm.
on, and they're telling him, he's basically saying again, you're never going to be pure blood. And he goes, it's fine. Um, and he goes, take a look at the sunset. It'll be your last or whatever. And he pulls the guy's teeth out, and this is a way to get the council to be like, okay, we'll help you. And so he pulls his teeth out, and then he tells him to look at the sunset, and this is when the sun comes up, and the guy, he's like, what, it's getting hot out here kind of thing. And you see the guy start smoking, and then when the sun finally hits him, he's basically burning and disintegrating and everything, and the effects are
Hmm.
kind of cheesy in this scene. I'm like, and it was the 90s, it was 98. I can understand the CG. It was like stop motion almost. It wasn't really CGI, it was very stop motion with this. And his skin's just melting away. He looked like the guy from Indiana Jones. And when the sun finally hits, he just blows up, and I'm like, whoa, that was intense.
Yeah.
So any thoughts on what we've talked about thus far until we move on to the next scene?
So one of the fun facts that I learned about the train is that on the train, all the people on the train are cardboard cutouts. There's
Really?
only there's only one actual person on the train, and it's the visual effects guy that's on the train.
Okay. I guess because it moves so fast, you can't really notice it unless you're
Yeah,
like freeze framing it. Okay, that's interesting. That is
yeah.
interesting.
But
Uh,
I like how it was the visual effects guy. Like they found that way to work him in and kind of give him that props for doing. Because I mean, it's late '90s. Late
yeah,
'90s visual effects were great, quote unquote.
they were getting better. I mean, look at the Mummy. It had some more. You're like,
It,
ooh. I mean, Mummy Returns had a pretty bad one with the Scorpion King. You're just like, oh, what the hell
yeah.
happened to him? That's not the Rock.
Uh,
The Rock in the game looked better than he did in the movie. Even in the wrestling games, he looks better than that. Anyways, we're not talking about Mummy Returns. Not yet, at least.
yeah.
So after this is they when Frost goes back to the council, the Jedi
Mhm.
Vampire Council, and they're like, where's Udve or whatever his name was. And I was like, oh, he's not coming. And he throws the teeth down on the table, and the guy catches him, and he's like, oh shit, you ain't screwing around. You better, okay, we'll work with you, kind of thing. And that was his way of saying, you guys are gonna help me do this thing.
Mhm.
So um, after that, I remember Blade is walking around in the during the day, daywalker, and he sees Frost across the street, and Frost has this little girl with him, and I think he's basically telling him, we can do this, the easy way or the hard way kind of thing. Give us the girl, we need her kind of thing. Um, and I think Frost also has that stuff on him because he says your mascara is running, and he's got the girl, basically not by the neck, but like right here, and he's basically saying one more move, and I'm gonna, cut her And you see his nail get longer as he's doing that. So he's basically telling Blade, "You're gonna, do what we say. We run this town kind of thing." And when he goes to shoot at him, it was a cool effect where you see the bullets coming towards Frost, and he kind of just dodges out of the way. Remember, this is before Matrix, so he just dodges out of the way, and the bullets just go, and he throws the girl across the street, and she manages to land in a food stand. So, oh no, 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 I'm sorry. She lands in the street, and Blade has to jump across the street to get her. It's either
Mhm.
go after Frost or save this girl before she dies, gets hit by a car. Jumps across, grabs her, ends up at across the street where all the little food vendors are and everything, or newspaper vendors are, and he looks down at her. He's like, "Go home," and she just bye, runs away. I believe it's after this when they end up at the hideout, and Whistler and Karen are sitting there talking because Blade's out at this time. He's not there. And somehow they know he's not there, and they find their way over there. So she's just talking about it, and he's explaining to the situation on how Blade
Mhm.
became, the vampire, or how he became when he was. His mom was bitten and everything.
Mhm.
Earlier, you see, I might have already skipped over it, but you see Frost talking to. I think he's gotten the disc. This might be after this scene, but he's gotten the disc, and he's looking at it, and it says, something something complete on the blood god. And he's like, okay, cool. And this lady pops up, and you're just like, who the hell is that? I'm figuring what the hell. She's some random whatever, some lady, whatever. Move on. Um, so they're in the hideout, and he's Whistler's talking to Karen, and he's explaining what happened to his family. A drifter came in, they let him in, he killed his whole family and spared him and everything. And he's talking about how he lost his family and how he came across Blade. And I think he said he was going to kill him at one point. He after that thing with his family, he was hunting down vampires basically all the time, and he said he was gonna kill Blade because he was snacking on like a homeless guy or something like that. And he didn't. He didn't kill him. He kept him alive. He spared him. Um, because Blade was just a kid on the street. Just no family, nothing.
Mhm.
And then it's at this point when he hears something. He's like, "What the hell is that?" And he's just walking around, and you see again, like the little girl. You see them kind of dodging in and out of areas, kind of like the Scooby Doo cartoons where they go across the
Mhm.
way and everything. So he gets attacked. He gets shot, I believe, in the leg. And they come up, or Frost comes up and says, "Hey, what a nice place." I think they had a tracker in the stuff that Blade took. That's probably how they knew where they were. And he's like, "It's a nice place you got here. Be ashamed if somebody messed it up." And he just punches him, and they start basically beating him up. And he just says, "Bite me and get it over with." He goes, "I don't know. I'm not going to bite you. I'm going to toy with you," kind of thing. They
Mhm.
take Karen, they leave, and you don't know what happened to Whistler until Blade comes back, and he's finally gets back, and he's like, well, Whistler did get some good kills in before that. He shot some of the familiars, so Blade finally shows up, and he's just like, something happened here. What happened? And he realizes that she's gone, and he walks past this thing. You just see like a sheet with blood on it. He kind of starts to walk past it, but then he goes back and looks over. Takes the sheet. He doesn't even look. He just takes the sheet off, looks over and realizes it's Whistler. And he's upset because Whistler was like a father character to him, basically. He took care of him and kept him from going full vampire. You never go full vampire
Mhm.
unless you do. So he says basically, help me. Uh, oh no, 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 I'm sorry. He has a thing that says watch me. So Blade watches the thing, and Frost is like, hey, we got the girl. If you want to get her back, come over here. Typical bad guy thing. And I think Whistler kind of wakes up at this point, and he says, "Give me your gun. I'm gonna, end it and everything." And he refuses, and Whistler's just yelling at him like, "No, give me the damn gun. I'm gonna do this." So he walks away, and you hear the gunshot, but you don't see a body, so we don't know what happened actually to Whistler. I It's assumed he's dead. We're just gonna go with
Yeah.
that. So Blade's gonna take care of business. He starts making all the little. This is a typical, like, I call it the Rambo montage, where he's making all the weapons and everything, and he's going through and making the super serum that he had, not the serum, the super thing that like blows up vampires. He did it. No, he had not used it yet. I don't think the little. I call it the EpiPen of vampire garlic killing thing. Um, Any thoughts though, real quick, on the whole Whistler scene and him dying?
So one thing I've always found interesting is how they chose to keep a lot of very cliche vampire lore about, like, in a lot of vampire movies you see that their nails can grow out long,
Hmm.
that vampires can't be out in daylight. uh there are certain things that vampires are hurt by, certain things that vampires aren't hurt by. And one of the things that's very stereotypical is a crucifix. You always hold up a crucifix to a vampire and it hurts them.
Yeah.
One thing that I learned in this movie was that when they were discussing what was going to be able to harm vampires and not, they specifically said that crucifixes cannot harm the vampires in this
Yeah.
universe. Because one of the directors said, what if they grab a Jewish person and turn them into a vampire? A crucifix won't bother them. And I was like, I've never thought of that before.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Yeah,
true.
but I found that very interesting.
It's like in Van Helsing when they hold up the crucifix to Dracula and he's like starts to scream. He's like, ah, and then he just grabs it and like melts it.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't do anything to me. So I want to say they might have stolen that little idea from this. Yeah, so he's getting ready. He's gearing up. He's going to the penthouse where Frost is. Basically, he's going through and trying to find, where Frost is, and he sneaks in and he ends up fighting two vampires. Stabs one of them in the eye with the EpiPen. Gets the other one, I think, in the head or the here. I don't remember, but he gets both of them basically, and they start like doing the whole Total Recall thing where they're just like, getting bigger,
Oh.
and he's walking around. And you see the pop on one side and the pop on the other side. It's like, oh, that's what that does. Anyways, he's walking around, gets ambushed by some more people, and he's basically it's overpowered at this point. He can't figure out he can't find a way out of it, and so Frost is sitting there talking to him again. I think Karen might be in this scene, but you see the lady from earlier walk up, and you're like, "There's that lady again. Who the hell is that?" You realize it was Blade's mom the whole time. And then you find out Deacon is the one that bit her and turned her into a vampire. Therefore, Blade is his son, kind of thing. And that's why they needed the blood from Blade so much, because they wanted the blood from him to become Daywalkers themselves. Um, so that's going on. They throw Karen into a hole too, and you find out that her old coworker that got bit, who he assumed was dead earlier, was still alive. He's more like a zombie at this point, who just happens to be alive, or a zombie, a vampire zombie. I don't know, because he wasn't quite a vampire. I don't think he was just some weird creature thing, and I think she ends up killing him too. That scene I don't really remember a whole lot of, but they put Blade into this contraption, which is
Mhm.
supposed to drain his blood. And it does the job. It drains him pretty much to the point of where he's just about to die. And Karen comes up and finds him. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. But they bring the council in and they say, you all got to stand in your designated corners. We're going to get this show on the road. They stand at all their little spots and everything, and getting everything going. And I think when the machine starts up, it beams like a light into their forehead or whatever, which is basically the symbol of whatever their familiar was, I guess. And
Mhm.
they start, doing this thing or whatever, and basically their skeleton like flies out of them. And this again, CGI was not the best. I'm just like, ooh, that looks bad. Oh my god, that looks so bad. But it was a 90s movie, so they're flying around and they're doing their thing, and this is basically trying to get the blood god ready for Deacon. He's standing in the middle like, I'm gonna do this. We're gonna become, La Magra. Well, meanwhile, Karen's over there with Blade saying, bite me. Not like, oh, bite me, you piece of crap. No, bite me so you can get your blood, or so I can get my blood out of me into you, and get your health back and everything. And so he does, gets her back, or gets his strength back and everything. And then his mom comes up to him, and this is when you find out his name is Eric Brooks. And she's talking to him, going, "Oh, my baby boy, this and that, yada yada yada, blah blah blah." And he stabs her, and it's just like, "You're not my mother." And he stabs her twice, and she disintegrates into dust after that. And
Hmm.
then he's trying to find his way to the, ceremonial area where Deacon Frost is doing his thing, and he makes it there, and he actually fights because Quinn stole his glasses, and he stole them earlier in the movie, I believe, when they captured him the first time. No, trying to remember. He somehow Quinn got his glasses. I don't remember when he got his glasses, but he's like, they look stylish on me or whatever. He's got this suit, and I think that he tells at one point he tells Quinn, "Put your arm out," because they got his sword also. He's like, "Wait, are you serious?" He goes, "Yeah, put your arm out." He goes, "Oh, come on, man," because he's like, "I'm gonna cut your arm off again," basically, and then he says, "I'm just joking." He doesn't do it. Um, so they're fighting. Blade's fighting more familiars. He's fighting. When he defeats them, Quinn shows up and starts fighting him too. And this is a very short fight. He busts out a wire and just whoosh, head off, gone. And what's cool about this is his sunglasses fly off of him, and you see them flying in the air, and he catches them, puts them on, and this is when the fight between him and Deacon Frost starts up, and they're just going all crazy. But they think the stuff is serum. They think it's serum, the little vials and everything, because somehow it ends up. I think he kicked it upwards, and it ends up in a crack in the wall or whatever, right?
Hmm.
Deacon Frost looks up. He goes, "Your serum. It's not going to help you now." And they're fighting and everything, and the crack in the wall kind of like, or the debris falls, and somehow that comes out of, it gets unstuck, and so when it falls down close enough to Blade, he kicks it, and no, I'm sorry, I think he kicks it and he throws them constantly at Frost. And
Hmm.
so you look at Frost, and he's got like this pinata, not pinata, a push pin looking thing going on,
Yeah,
like the little push pin, the things that
that involuntary
sewers use.
acupuncture.
Yeah, he looks like he's had some acupuncture going on. But before that, they're in this really cool fight scene, and they're just kicking the crap out of each other. And he cuts Frost in half, and he's sitting there floating. You just see all the blood, and then he goes back together, and the zooms in a blade. He mouths, and I'm like, oh man, how's he gonna defeat this guy? So that's when he throws all the explodey epipens at him, and Frost is just sitting there like, oh, and he starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until kablamo, he blows up and he's done. And that's basically the end of the movie right there.
Hmm.
They walk out, and I gotta say something about the ending in just a second when we get to after, because it's a deleted scene. They walk out, and she's basically like, so what are you gonna do from here? And he says, I'm gonna hunt every vampire I can. Pretty much is what he was implying. So the scene fades to black, and then it fades back in, and you see Russia, and you see these two people. Same thing as the beginning of the movie. The lady's asking the guy, "Where are we going?" And he's like, "It's a secret." So they're walking around, and then you hear Blade say something in Russian, and I think this is in subtitles. I forgot what he said, but the vampire turns around, and I think it just ends there. I think that it cuts to the credits because he opens up his shirt, his jacket, and it cuts to credits, which you're assuming, okay, there's going to be a second movie because he's in Russia. So that vampire is obviously dust at this point. And then it cuts to
Hmm.
credits. Any thoughts on what we just talked about before I get into the deleted scene of the alternate ending?
Yeah, so I think the deleted scene at the end is exactly what I was gonna talk about. So I'll
Okay.
let you do that one. But so thinking back through this whole movie, especially thinking about Deacon and 90s and stuff like that, try to imagine either Mark Wahlberg or Skeet Ulrich playing Deacon, because they were two very close actors at getting chosen for the role.
Mark Wahlberg, no. Skeet Ulrich probably would have been a better pick
I
for
agree.
Frost
I agree.
because he was in Scream. He was also in
Hmm.
The Craft. He Mark Wahlberg, I don't think was as big back then. He was still trying to get into the acting world, but I don't think he was as I don't think he was as big back then. You needed somebody who back in the 90s when they cast people in movies, they would do the well-known actors. Not like today where they
Hmm.
can be like, "Hey, we can just cast an unknown and it might still do well." Like they did with the Bond movies recently. They
Right.
cast Daniel Craig, and nobody knew who Daniel Craig was. Like, who the hell is this guy? Henry Cavill, same thing. Who was this guy? And he was a great Superman. I don't know what the hell these Warner Brothers is doing. Anyways, that's not here nor there. But yeah, Skeet Ulrich probably would have been a better pick for me out of those two.
Yeah, so, I mean, of course, I'm not the horror fan, so Scream is not my favorite movie that I know Skeet Ulrich is from. Um, my actual favorite Skeet Ulrich movie is, like, I don't think I've ever actually talked to somebody who has seen this movie, but I don't know if you've seen the movie Chill Factor that has Cuba Gooding Jr. and Skeet Ulrich in the
Mm-mm.
main part. It's actually really funny. I would call it like comedy action. There's some really good one-liners from it. So when I'm thinking Skeet Ulrich 90s in this role, it's really easy to see. I think he would have been great in that part. But
Yeah,
does the deleted scene that you're thinking of have something to do with a Marvel movie that came out recently?
terrible Marvel movie. Yes.
Yep,
So
yep.
I didn't know this at the end when I first saw this. I'm like, who was that guy at the top? So the alternate ending is the same as the regular ending. They come out, they're looking out into the sunset, and she goes, "Is that a friend of yours?" And he looks over at the. They weren't even supposed to have the Russia ending. I don't think. I think this was going to be the ending and set up a sequel to the movie. So she looks over, or she says, "That's a friend of yours." And he looks over, and you see a guy standing on a building. And you're like, "Who is that?" Didn't think anything of this when I was a kid, but it was. They said it was supposed to be Morbius,
Hmm.
and he was going to be the villain in the second movie. That had been rumored for so long. There had been so many times where they said Morbius was going to show up in a Blade movie, Blade was going to show up in a Spider-Man movie, yada yada yada. And I'm like,
Hmm.
just make it happen for crying out loud. But I understand why they couldn't, because they were all under different, as we talked about before, they were all under different studios. So
Yeah,
that would have
they
been hard to do. Like, I think Wolverine was going to show up in Spider-Man 2,
yeah.
and they couldn't do it because Fox, Sony,
Yeah,
you're
so
all under Disney now. You can make it happen. Sorry, go
they
ahead.
had already written Morbius in as the main baddie for Blade 2, but again, Marvel was in a lot of trouble. They had to keep selling off rights to characters, and they actually sold off the rights to Morbius to Artesian Entertainment.
God, where
So
are they now? God,
yeah,
blast from the past. Oh my God, I forgot about
yeah,
them. I
yeah,
used to call them Artisan.
yeah.
Um,
They're probably Artesian. I'm gonna get
they
fancy with it for some reason. I
man,
don't know.
that is a blast from the past because I used to buy a lot of VH. If y'all don't know what a VHS tape is, this big bulky thing we used to have. We put them in our TVs or VCRs when we were kids. It was DVD on a cassette tape. No, you know what? Forget it. Um,
Yeah. Well, if you've ever
uh,
heard the phrase "be kind, rewind,"
Be
that's
kind,
from that
rewind. Yeah.
era.
So they when I would go to Target and stuff, they used to sell those, and it was all artisan entertainment videos. Like I had Total Recall, Terminator 2. I don't know why I bought
Mhm.
it because the back of the box says exclusive new footage. It was not new footage, a lying piece of crap. Um, it was all the Arnold movies were on artisan. It was a lot of the Lionsgate movies, and I know that Wishmaster was an artisan movie too. I believe the first and the second one were. I didn't really care about Wishmaster, but
Mhm.
yeah. Man, I remember that. Yeah. So nothing ever came of the Morbius um
Nope.
movie, and the thing is, he's a Spider-Man character, so
Yeah.
that's another reason why they couldn't get him in Blade because Spider-Man hadn't even been made yet. Can you imagine if they had Morbius show up in a movie that wasn't Spider-Man before Spider-Man ever came out?
No.
I wouldn't be
No, I
surprised.
couldn't
I wouldn't be
at all.
surprised. I mean, you look at these movies and you're just like, some of these characters are already out before their main character came out. Like,
Mhm.
I'm trying to think. You had Kingpin. No, Spider Man was already a thing, but Kingpin was in Daredevil, which
Mhm.
didn't make sense because I'm like, he's a Spider Man villain. Why is he in Daredevil? And why? Well, rest in peace, Michael Clark Duncan, but he played a great Kingpin. I don't care what anybody
Yes,
says,
I
regardless of the
agree.
casting. He played an awesome Kingpin.
I
Uh,
loved him as Kingpin. Michael Clark Duncan. He made an awesome
but
Kingpin.
Vincent D'Onofrio is pretty good too. I'm not gonna lie,
Oh
he's
yeah.
pretty damn
Yeah, he
awesome.
is for
Um,
sure.
but
But,
yeah,
so Wesley Snipes was not supposed to play Blade. He actually was not one of the first ideas for the casting director. They were looking at Denzel Washington
hmm
and Lawrence Fishburne. And considering that Blade came out in 1998 and The Matrix came out in 1999, you have to think that if they would have picked Lawrence Fishburne for Blade, somebody else would have been for
Morpheus.
Matrix. Yeah, Morpheus.
Well, you know, Will Smith was supposed to be Neo, and he turned it down, and I think he regrets that decision now.
I'm glad he
Wouldn't have
turned
worked.
it.
It would not have worked. I think Keanu Reeves did a better job. But
Oh
sorry, we're
yes.
getting on a tangent here. Talking about Matrix. No, I don't. Lawrence Fish. I mean, not. Neither one of those guys would have worked for me. I'm sorry. Denzel Washington. I really have not seen too many of his movies, so I can't say much on him. Um,
I don't see him being like, I mean, he's done action movies, but he's never really done anything that's like a comic book
yeah. Well,
superhero action movie, and I don't see it working
he was
well.
also going to be, if I'm not mistaken, they also looked at Wesley Snipes and Denzel Washington for Black Panther when they were going to make that back in
Yeah, like that.
1990 something, 91, I think.
Yeah, that
Oh
was.
my God, we did have a Marvel movie before this. We had Captain America, and it was a piece of garbage. It was
Oh,
horrible. Oh my God, it's just the worst movie I've ever
oh, I
seen.
forgot about that. I think my
And
brain
I
like
have it on
erased
Blu-ray.
it.
It was so bad. I remember watching it with my dad. We had The Punisher also, which was not very good either, with Dolph Lundgren. He didn't even have the symbol on his shirt, which I thought was kind of odd. But um, we did have Marvel movies before this. But again, like I said, they were not the best movies. And
No.
I don't think anybody saw Captain America. I think it was straight to video, if I'm not mistaken. It was straight to video, straight to TV, or made for TV, something like that. I have the
Yeah.
Blu-ray of it, and I'm just like, oh God, this movie sucks. When I was a kid, though, I thought it was cool. I was like, oh, Captain America. Why is Red Skull not red though? But I didn't realize. And when I saw the first Chris Evans movie, I was like, oh, that's what they were trying to do in that original Captain America. That looked like shit. When Hugo Weaving was wearing the mask and he takes it off and the Red Skull's under it, I was like, well, why didn't y'all
Yep.
just do that? Why didn't you just have him wear a face and then he's pulling it away? And then when he pulls it away, you cut to the Red Skull. Why'd you have to take the Red Skull mask and paint it the same color as the guy's skin? Right?
Oh, it was so bad. It was so bad.
Oh my God. See, this is why I say Blade really helped get these movies back on the map and get Marvel back into like the good graces with everybody.
It
And at
definitely
first,
did
sorry, go
because
ahead.
like yeah, no, they definitely did because the studios knew that comic books and superheroes weren't popular at the time, so they weren't willing to give the budget that was needed to
Mhm.
do justice to a comic book superhero movie.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with Blade, the first Blade. This movie didn't have a big budget, but they made it work with the big budget. And then the turnaround, they made so much money off of it because of the low budget in the beginning. And that's the reason why the studio was willing to hand out way more money
Mhm.
for Blades 2 and 3.
Yeah, and Blade Trinity was a mess of a movie. It was a mess on screen. It was a mess off screen.
Yeah.
Oh, we're gonna have to cover that one at one point.
Oh, yeah.
Blade Two was actually. I had some issues with that at first. Maybe if I watch it again, I might enjoy it. But when I first saw Blade Two, I was like, Blade should not be working with vampires. What is going on here? I don't like this. I
Yeah.
don't like this at all. And that's who I thought was at the end of the movie. I thought it was one of the Reapers from the second movie, and it turns out it's not. It was Morbius.
Yep.
So interesting. Um, yeah, and like you said earlier, back then when we were in high school, middle school, and stuff, and people were like, "Comic, you watch X-Men? That movie looks so cheesy." Those same people that gave me crap for watching these movies are now fans of these movies
Oh, yeah.
because one of them, he's like, I think I was talking about Avengers, and at the time when Avengers came out, I thought it was still like, it was kind of okay to be a comic book movie fan
Mhm.
and enjoy comic books at this time because Iron Man is really what kind of helped push the envelope to the casual fans and to make it like awesome because you got Robert Downey Jr., who was a big name actor and people like him. So when you cast him as Tony Stark, people are gonna go watch the movie, and so more people started becoming fans. And I remember one dude, I was like, "Didn't you tell me in eighth grade that you thought X-Men looked stupid?" And he goes,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I was wrong. It's actually pretty awesome." I was like, "I knew it."
I'll fully admit I was definitely gatekeeping whenever comic book movies started to become really popular. I was definitely gatekeeping because I'm like, you gave me so much crap
Hmm.
all those years ago, and now you want to be a fan. I was mad. I was jaded for a while. It took me a little bit to stop gatekeeping.
The only time I ever did something like that was when Heath Ledger was a Joker, because so many people gave him such crap about that dumb movie he was in before that. They're like, "Oh, it's gonna be this, it's gonna be that," and I have one friend. He's not a friend anymore, but he would always say, "Oh, he's gonna be a terrible Joker. He looks horrible." Blah 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 blah. And then Heath Ledger sadly passed away, and this same dude was talking crap about it all the way up until the movie, and he's like, then he was just obsessed with it. Like all these people, I think that's why that movie did well, only because he passed away. I don't think a lot of people would have, and that came out the same year as Iron Man. So I think a lot of people who saw Iron Man were like, "We're gonna watch Dark Knight," but I don't think Dark Knight would have done as well as it did if he had not passed away. That's my thought.
I agree with that, and I agree that that was why he got the Oscar, that because it was posthumous and just a whole lot of things because he died. But at the same time, I can't take anything away from the performance because I was definitely one of those that did not have faith in it. I
Hmm.
didn't think it was going to work out, and I was honestly blown away.
I
Blown away.
See, I've always been a Batman fan, so I was like, I'm gonna give the dude a chance. Like, I was gonna go watch the movie either way. I was excited. I'm like,
Yeah.
hell yeah, this is gonna be awesome. But
Yeah, now Batman's my number
oh
one
my god,
superhero.
and his performance was better than I thought it was gonna be. We're gonna talk about all
Yeah.
this again when we get to Dark Knight.
Yes.
Um, Sorry, the movie at hand. Are there any final thoughts you have on Blade as a character, or what do you think of your thoughts on the Blade that's coming from the MCU? What do you think? I know we haven't seen much, but it's currently on hold right now due to the writer strike. At the time of this going upload, it might be over, but at the time of recording, there is a writer strike going on, and the movie's currently on hold right now. But before
Mhm.
that, Marshala Ali said he did not like the script because there was not enough action in the movie. That worried. Well, it made me think. I'm glad he said something, because if it had not had a lot of action, I would have been a little annoyed, because Blade's not known for just being, hey, let's just sit here and, you know, talk all movie and everything. I
No.
mean, that's something like for The Matrix or um what do you call it? Dark Knight. I've seen people tell me, and I'll talk about that in just a second, but your thoughts on um the new Blade. Like, what do you think? What do you hope to see in it?
I'm really excited about it. I have a lot of hopes for it, especially with the background that's been laid by, Iron Man,
Mhm.
Captain America, the Avengers. Like there's so much of a foundation that there's no doubt that they're going to throw a lot of money at
Yeah.
this and give it the production value that it deserves. From the cast that I know of, I have a lot of high hopes for it because of that cast. Very excited about it. Um, I'm excited to see how different it feels
Hmm.
because the production is going to be different from late 90s production to
Yeah.
mid to 2020s production. So that's going to be the big thing that I'm looking for is basically the feel. Like how different does it feel?
Yeah.
But I am excited about it.
I just hope it's gonna be rated R. Um,
Oh, it has to
they
be. Has to
said,
be.
yeah, they said Deadpool 3 is gonna be rated R. Thank you so much,
I'm so
because
excited.
I can't do characters who are normally rated R characters and then you turn them into PG-13. I'm looking at you, Terminator 4, 5, and 6. No,
Yeah.
no, no. I
Yeah.
think I think Dark Fate was rated R. 4 and 5. I'm looking at you, Terminator.
Mhm.
Expendables 3. Yeah, no, they said Deadpool 3 is going to be rated R, so I would hope that Blade would also be rated R. I mean, yeah, I
Mhm.
understand they're under Disney now, but come on, you got to
No.
look at your audience who love these
Yeah.
characters. If you make a PG-13 Deadpool, they will rip you apart.
I
Sorry,
think
Mickey.
I think we finally gotten past the moms complaining it's a superhero movie, it should be for kids, blah blah blah. I think we finally got over that hill,
Yeah,
where enough people said, shut up and sit down. This was our thing 20, 30 years ago. Now
yeah.
we're adults. Now we want our adult
They were
superhero.
made for kids when we were kids. Um,
Yes, we're not
like,
kids anymore, we want the adult version. So I think we're finally over that
yeah,
hill, and I think we're finally going to get, because you can't have Blade and have it
yeah.
PG-13.
And
It's
I
just no.
I remember back when about 2008, 2009 ish, 2010 ish, when all the superhero movies started coming out. You had like well, Iron Man 1 and 2 had a 2 year gap. So it
Mhm.
was the MCU was very, very small at this point. All we had was Iron Man 1, Incredible Hulk. Iron Man 2 had not come out yet, but we still had Dark Knight, Watchmen, and Kick Ass. And I remember people went and saw Watchmen and they said, "This is nothing like Batman." I said, "Because it's not Batman. It's not
I
supposed to
don't.
be like Batman. It is a completely different story." Kick Ass. This is nothing like Super Bad. That makes no sense. It wasn't supposed to be like Superbad. It's not gonna be like Superbad. I remember we saw it, my parents and I, and this mom and her kid came in, and within 5 minutes they left. And I said, "Yeah, this isn't a kids movie at all. Like, not even close to being a kids movie."
Yep.
Um, so I don't know why you're here.
Yep.
So yeah, a
I
lot
think
of
I really appreciated how Deadpool 2 definitely started putting it in everybody's faces. Don't bring your kids to this.
people still brought their kids
Don't
though.
bring your kids to this.
People still brought their kids. They're like, "Oh, they were fine." I'm like, "Oh, whatever."
Yeah.
I know my parents wouldn't have taken me to see a movie like that when I was a kid.
No.
I had to wait until these movies came to like HBO or Cinemax or Stars or wherever, Showtime,
Mhm.
wherever they had them. I forgot where I first saw Blade. I think it was on Showtime actually. I had to wait till they went to TV so I could watch them on TV because my parents are like, "Nah, nah, 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 you're too young."
Yeah.
So yeah, that was Blade, guys. Sorry, we got a little bit on the tangent there at the end here. Something I was gonna say too was how the whole Marvel DC war, whatever. I got
Mhm.
friends who they don't like Marvel movies because they talk too much, and I'm like, but your DC movies they talk just as much, so make it make sense, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was Blade. Like I said, we're gonna cover more the rest of the Blade series, Blade 2 and 3. Probably not the TV show because I never watched it and I don't really care to watch it. It didn't last long enough for me to say, hey, I gotta watch this. Um, but yeah, we're gonna get into some more I think some more 80s movies in the next episode. We have one in particular that I want to talk about, one of my favorite movies of all time. So be sure to check that out when it goes live. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but with each season of videos of the podcast and everything, I think I might want to, and I didn't tell you this, but I think I might want to do like a live season finale of either like the movies we talked about throughout the season, or just kind of do like a top five, like our favorite five sci-fi movies, our top five favorite action movies, or not
Ah,
horror because Tesla's like, no horror for me. Um, so yeah, something like that. I'm thinking so. Yeah, and then again, if there's any movies you guys want us to cover, please let us know in the comments. I mean, I want to cover some obscure movies that I've never seen. There's some movies that I won't watch. So Requiem for a Dream is out. Ain't watching that movie ever again. I'm sorry. It disturbed the hell out of me.
yeah. It's a one watch. Great movie, but it's a one watch.
It's definitely one where I was like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, any movies that you want to, and if it's something I won't watch, you know, I'll say, hey, I'm sorry, that's not one that I want to watch just because of the content in the movie. Um, yeah. Do you have any closing remarks you'd like to add? Like, where can people find you on the
Uh,
web?
yeah, so Twitch, same name that I'm under right now, Boomer Sooner 6714 streaming. I'm gonna start uploading some gaming videos on my YouTube underneath the same name. Pretty much everything's gonna be, working with Matt in gaming, movies, all that kind of stuff. So,
Helping me in Star
uh,
Wars.
yeah.
I said I was gonna stop doing that, but I'm gonna actually pick it back up again after Spider-Man.
I anything and everything Star Wars, I am there.
Yeah, and we're gonna have a crazy like whenever we cover Star Wars, it's gonna be nuts. Yeah, you might be the one taking over and talking about it in that episode.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I might not give you a chance to talk on those.
hey, totally, that is totally fine. And so yeah, for me, you can catch me here on YouTube basically every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I upload premieres on Mondays. Right now, I'm dedicating it to wrestling videos. So I'm doing a WWE 2K23. I just got AEW Fight Forever. I'm not 100% sure I'm gonna upload that one because I'm still getting used to the controls, and I'm not sure if I even really like the game enough. If I do, I might just do simulated computer matches, which sometimes are more fun anyways because I get to actually watch the match instead of me winning every single one of them. Tuesday I stream 7:30. Actually, every premiere stream is at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Tuesdays I stream 7:30. Wednesdays is a premiere of just a playthrough of whatever game I'm playing off stream. Most of it is retro. Thursdays is a stream day. I think Thursdays are currently horror days, so like Resident Evil and stuff like that. Tuesdays are more of like my open world games, and Fridays is one of two things. Either it's a solo stream for me, or it is a co-op stream with my wife, playing Dead Island. I don't know when we're ever gonna finish that game because we keep jumping into it and we just keep getting distracted with everything in that game. But that's what Fridays are, is me and her. And then I'm thinking this show is gonna premiere on Saturday nights. Um, I wanted to do Fridays or Mondays, but then premieres and streams took over. So Saturday is the only day I can think of for this. So 7:30 p.m. ish time for that. Sundays might or might not be streams. Just it depends how we feel. If we want to, and it would only be the weekends that my wife is off. So um, yeah. Other than that, guys, I've got nothing else to add. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have been enjoying these episodes so far, with the movies we've been talking about. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next episode.
Later.